Welcome to CivilNet. My guest today is Michel Mossessian, who heads Mossessian & Partners, an architectural firm based in London. And this firm and Mr. Mossessian are responsible for some very interesting projects around the world, and we will show you pictures of some of them during this interview. We're going to talk with Mr. Mossessian today, who's on his first visit to Armenia, about the politics of architecture, because I'm not an architect, but I certainly appreciate the work that architects do. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on, particularly on the development processes in places like Armenia. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
You studied at Cooper.
First of all, good morning, Armenia.
Good morning, Armenia. This
is my first day.
And it's your first interview.
And that's the first interview.
Well, thank you and good morning. At the end, I'll ask you why you came. No, I'll ask you now. Do you know why you came?
Well, I have origins from this part of the world. And I'm primarily curious. I don't know what I'm going to find. But I want to be very open and hopefully give back what I see into a series of proposals, but not necessarily to my profession, but also to the citizens that we represent from different backgrounds, different origins. I live in many countries.
Your office is in London.
My office is in London.
You're born in France.
I grew up in Paris.
And you studied in New York as well?
New York, Harvard, and I lived and worked in Chicago.
Wow. Let's talk about the ideological basis of work like architecture. You do your work and we enjoy it, appreciate it, or denounce it. And often, it seems to me, all of that happens because at the basis of the design and the planning, it's not always that the community and the audience is in mind. Sometimes it's just the building in isolation.
You're right. There's a big trend these days to make buildings as objects that end up in magazines and they look very good in picture. But we tend to forget that the reality of our buildings is to create environment, to play, to live, to work. And it's essentially for the end users, the people that are going to play, live, and work. So, and I think we should encourage today the fact that you may play, live, and work differently in different parts of the world. So it's going a little bit, my thinking in general, is going a little bit against the notion that we had for many, many decades, where tending to standardize on a model that can be universalized. Mainly influenced by the American model that became an economy where you can travel in planes and end up in the same type of hotels, same type of offices, and then ultimately same type of residential service.
Because that's supposed to be comforting, yeah?
Well, it's been a very good model to, in a way, to allow people of different parts of the world to dialogue. So there was a level of comfort in the type of space that people wanted to engage with. But today that we know a bit more about the recognition of different cultures of different parts of the world, I think it's time to go back to what is unique in every place and what are the people, what is the best environment for people to give the best of their perception of the world. So it's kind of reversing a little bit from the one way of being to all the different ways of addressing a problem, an issue, a representation, and ultimately a vision about why and how we want to be in the collective.
When we look at what happens in Yerevan, because this is where we are, but I'm sure we're not the only place in the world, often we see that there is this perhaps unnecessary struggle between the old and the modern and the new. And it seems as if we haven't found answers to how to reconcile those two. We have what you said, these object buildings that may be attractive, I guess, but sure don't seem to fit where they are. Why is that? Why do we end up in this situation?
It's very difficult to make shifts, and usually the big changes are catastrophic in the capacity of finding your reference in space and in ways of thinking. Most of our actions are coming from the perception of the brain. So there's always a time of translation between what your brain can see and what actually your body needs to address the time that you live in. So obviously Armenia went through a big shift, became an independent country, was pretty much ruled under a Soviet regime where most of the decisions were made probably outside of Armenia. And today, Armenia, like many other parts of the world, are left to themselves to decide of their future. So that takes a little bit of a vision, but nobody can be criticized about not being capable of pulling out a vision all of a sudden, and certainly not to repeat what other people have done. So the recommendation would be to say what is Armenia culture and what Armenia stands for, and it's a complex problem, I think, because it's not just Armenia, it's a diaspora, of which I belong, of many, many places in the world.
But for that to happen, I'm not an architect, but I'm a Democrat, and it seems to me that for that to happen, we need to really think like Democrats so that all of those different aspects that you mentioned can be all put on one table, on one plate, in one drawing, and come up with a decision that is more or less a consensus, a vision that is bought by consensus. And we have democratic issues, so can we ever do that with our architecture, without urban planning, if we don't solve our democratic issues? Is it possible?
There's a notion that I think democracy calls for complexity, where in America, when you say complex, people hear complicated. Yeah. Actually, complexity is like how you can set and put together a set of parameters that are coming from the social, political, the economical, and the environmental, and then how you can orchestrate all those input into something that starts to make sense to a locality, to a sense of place. So that in there, you have also a sense of history. It's not going in negation with what has been done before. And apparently in Armenia, you have long history, you have short history, and that has to be reconciled in order to go in the future. So the vision has to be rooted in the understanding of a past, and the past can be variegated, it can be diverse, it can be agreed or not, but it has to be recognized as a continuum. It's very difficult.
If we look at what we do in this city as a series of construction projects rather than a series of architecture projects, we don't ask those questions, right? We just build a building.
I agree. I always say that you have to go beyond buildings, and that's where architecture resides. Architecture is a profession. It's not an act. It's not because you're an architect you're going to produce architecture. You're mostly going to produce buildings. Okay, now how a building becomes architecture, that is a collective effort. It's a collaboration. It goes along with the client, defining a vision. It goes along with listening to what is possible and how we can translate that vision into a form, a physical form. But most of all, the form has to be inhabited by the people that are going to find comfort, whether you live or work. I mean, it's a symbiotic relationship. So we are just the vectors to implement a vision that is collaboratively set in the complexity of culture, society. Democracy is obviously, it's kind of what we will respond to in most part of the world. And this is an opportunity, again, for Armenia to set a different tonality and its own voice.
In Armenia, although this discussion does not take place in the context of democratic processes, it does take place in the context of this struggle between the old and the new. You live and work in London, you work in Qatar. We're not the only place in the world where there is this tension between the old and the new. How do other people resolve it? Where has it been resolved well?
Well, London is fascinating, and London has had the benefit in the last 15 years to benefit from a success of being a place, a destination for many, many people in the world. And there's been a kind of a voluntary immigration to London. And I've been questioning why, and why also I ended up setting up my home, my place of work in London about 12 years ago. Well, I think there's one thing is like the British system is probably the oldest democracy with a parliament that was established in the Middle Ages. And the Londoners, I'm not talking necessarily to the English or the British people, but the Londoners are very tolerant as people, as a way of relating to others.
They've been empire, they can afford to be.
Well, but yes, and they've been exposed to other cultures. And they do never, I mean, as you see, they never impose actually the way of ruling over other territories. They just gave some rules and took the benefit from it.
Some will disagree with you, but that's okay. We'll let that go.
Let's put it that they invented most of the games.
Yes.
So
Yes.
everybody can play the game, and it sounds to be very popular these days, talking about football. But, so London, what happened to London in the result of being an open structure where you can express yourself and be tolerated for your different point of views makes it a very comfortable place to actually participate, not necessarily just to the London scenery, but also to the world. So it's a very, and the other issue that London presents is like the long history of discontinuity that it has to offer. London is not marked of any period in time. It's constantly an ever-changing system of rebuilding something that can have a better use decided by private owners. So private ownership is key in London, and anybody can own a piece of land and decide with the planning process, with the political agenda, that a building can have better use and better economical sense if it was replaced. So you have in that sense a continuous change, ever-changing relationship to the city, and that makes the citizen of the city as well extremely participant, because in your lifetime you're going to see the effects of your daily work. And it's not just the architects, it's everybody involved in shaping the society.
How about Doha, which is a very different place?
Doha
I don't know if it's more similar to us, but it's certainly different from London.
Doha is very unique in the context of the Gulf, where we've all seen Doha in comparison, well, we all seen Dubai producing a series of objects which were a collection of solitudes with no ground, just to make the skyline. Well, the Dubai model kind of failed. It was kind of forced on an economical model of producing objects as icon. And the question in Doha that came from Her Highness Sheikh Moza, a woman in a very male-dominated structure and society, that put a vision to say, how can we produce a place that is unique to our culture or in relation to our culture? So when you see a skyline, you don't think that you'll be better off being in New York or in Hong Kong, because it's been done and probably better than what is in Dubai. So the question was, how do you root a 21st century sustainable city, which is the heart of Doha, rebuilding the heart, and make it mixed use, low rise, and high density, reinventing the village structure where diversity in age, activities is recognized as the framework of the space. So here, it's a dream project coming from a very strong vision of a woman saying, for example, meeting of culture, not melting of culture, which is kind of, an opposite of this ideal world of the melting pot that America has succeeded very well for 2 centuries and now needs to reinvent with the diversity. So in a way, Americans should learn again, Armenians, for those in Los Angeles or Watertown in the East Coast. But and then, the richness is in the diversity. America has that. Now the world has to respond to that as well. And in Qatar, there's a call for creating an environment that is open to diversity.
So finally, we need to point our leaders, our governors, our rulers, I don't know how to call them, towards places with vision in order to draw examples, perhaps, because we're not Doha, we're not working on a blank slate, we're not London, this is not a 600-year-old cosmopolitan city, it's an old city, but not that. And we need to find our place somehow in the middle. And perhaps we can do that in collaboration with people like you and architects here, so that really we can come to a collaborative vision.
Yeah, I will welcome the invitation to think. I will have to disengage my emotional ties with the land.
No, you shouldn't.
But I would think that Armenia has an offer, being so international by nature. Everybody knows an Armenian in the world, and each time they say, fantastic man, great knowledge, incredible loyalty. So there's great values associated to being Armenian in the world. But in a way, the world doesn't know actually where Armenia is. They say they're very surprised as a country. They can refer to the Caucasian zone. They can maybe refer to Ararat. They can refer to the Bible, maybe Noah's Ark. But they don't know that there's a place. Actually, Armenia is not on the map. And I think architecture can help to put Armenia on the map, or to put Yerevan on the map. But that will have to be unique to the culture and not a reproduction of something else. So that is, we'll have to go through a process that will engage the multiplicity, political, economical, and cultural, and without saying that an idea needs money necessarily. I mean, money is always spent. I mean, I see many occasions in our work where the budget is reasonable, but the result is outstanding because of how people receive it.
It's a great message to end with. Thank you. We've been talking to Michel Mossessian, originally from France, via the US to London, and now to Armenia. We're glad you're here, and we hope you come back. Next time I'll ask you why you came back.
Good. I look forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you for watching CivilNet.